I'm going to make some of you upset with this episode. Yes, I'm going to tell a short story, and it's going to be, actually, this one is pretty much absolutely just awful. Maybe the most awful one we've told. Not for my delivery or for my set design. It looks pretty good. It's just a terrible story, and there's a death involved. You know, whenever there's a death involved, it's legitimately just awful. We don't want to glamorize that, so maybe some of the names have changed, but it is what it is, right? We don't want to glamorize people's deaths or glamorize terrible people. We just want to tell some stories that might creep you out, pass some time for you, some short stories while you're driving down the road or you're trying to fall asleep at night. That's what this is all about. And I'm Brandon Bishop, and I enjoy telling these stories, and they're creepy, and they're just awful. Another thing that is pretty much just awful is ghost hunting. This is where I'll lose a few of you, because if you're watching this, there's a very good chance that you're all into the ghost hunting and the ghost hunters and the adventurers, and there's 9 million teams out there now that all claim to have paranormal evidence, and they do things with machines, and they're like, oh, I got an app that tells me when there's a ghost. And, oh no, did you hear that? What was that? Oh my God. Yeah. It's just, here's the thing, people. If you want to find a ghost, and you really want to find a ghost, you might think you found a ghost. It's just one of those things. Your brain is a miraculous machine up there, okay? It's a computer that kind of gives you what you want sometimes, and it's, you know, I'm not gonna poop on you too much. I could. I'm not going to. All I'm gonna say is that the little gadgets are bullshit. Nobody has ever seen a ghost, and most of the stuff that is evidence of the paranormal is bullshit. But in this case, it's a ghost hunting crew in this short story. And there's a guy named Devin. Like I said, may or may not be his real name, but that's not important. What happened was far more scary and far more terrifying and far more just awful than anything they could have ever found on a EVP recording or a shadow figure or an orb.
In the deep, humid heart of Alabama lies Oak Ridge Cemetery, a sprawling burial ground with a notorious reputation and centuries of whispered secrets. It was here that a team of ghost hunters, fueled by adrenaline and the promise of uncovering the truth behind its haunted past, set out on what would become a journey into darkness. What began as an exciting expedition ended in a nightmarish ordeal, as one of the team vanished without a trace for an entire month, only for the shocking truth to emerge in an unexpected twist. This is the true story of that fateful night, a story of spectral legends, accidental horrors, and the desperate struggle for survival. Meet the team. Marcus Mark Ellison, a seasoned paranormal investigator with a keen eye for the unexplained. Rachel Monroe, a fearless documentarian whose camera never left her side. And Devin Carter, the tech-savvy sound engineer with a knack for capturing voices from beyond. The three had spent years chasing ghost stories, and when they heard the legends surrounding Oak Ridge Cemetery, stories of restless spirits and eerie sounds echoing among the tombstones, they couldn't resist the call. Oak Ridge Cemetery, established in the late 1800s, was known not only for its beautiful, time-worn mausoleums, but also for the tragic tales of families torn apart by feuds, mysterious disappearances, and unexplained phenomena. Rumors of phantom figures wandering among the graves and voices carried on the wind made it a magnet for thrill seekers and ghost hunters alike. On a sweltering Tuesday night in early August 2022, the team gathered in a beat-up rental van outside the cemetery's iron gates. The air was heavy with humidity and anticipation. Mark, ever the leader, outlined their plan. They would explore the northern section of the cemetery, set up equipment to capture any paranormal activity, and document every eerie sound and shadow. They intended to spend several hours before calling it a night, confident that they could handle whatever Oak Ridge threw their way. Oak Ridge Cemetery was a maze of narrow, winding pathways flanked by towering oak trees whose branches intertwined overhead like skeletal arms. The soft glow of the moon filtered through the foliage, casting ghostly shadows on rows of weathered headstones. As the trio stepped through the creaking iron gate, a chill ran down their spines. Even on that hot August night, the cemetery exuded an unnatural coldness, as if the dead had an endless claim on the air. Mark led the way, flashlight in hand, as they navigated the labyrinthine paths. Rachel's camera recorded every detail, from the faded inscriptions on ancient tombstones to the eerie mist that seemed to drift in defiance of the warm weather. Devin set up his digital recorder near an old mausoleum rumored to be a hotspot for paranormal voices, while Mark and Rachel ventured further into the cemetery. The silence was palpable. Aside from the occasional rustle of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl, nothing stirred. Yet beneath that quiet, an undercurrent of tension pulsed, an unspoken awareness that they were not entirely alone. As the night wore on, the team began to pick up subtle signs that something was amiss. Devin's recorder, which had been capturing only the ambient sounds of the cemetery, suddenly picked up a series of low, almost imperceptible murmurs. Rachel, reviewing her footage, noticed fleeting shadows moving at the edge of the frame, shapes that vanished the moment she zoomed in. Mark, who prided himself on his rational approach, couldn't shake the feeling that the cemetery was watching them. He found himself frequently glancing over his shoulder, half expecting to see a ghostly figure trailing behind. Still, the excitement of the investigation kept them moving forward. At one point, as they approached an ancient crypt marked Ellison family, ironically sharing Mark's surname, an inexplicable gust of wind swept through the area, rattling the loose stones. Mark paused for a moment, feeling an eerie connection to the past, then pressed on. They set up their base near a clearing surrounded by headstones, ready to document any paranormal occurrences as the night deepened. Everything seemed to be progressing as planned until, about 2 hours into the investigation, a frantic call crackled over their handheld radios. Rachel's voice came through, breathless and trembling. "Mark, Devin, something's wrong. Devin's not answering his mic." Mark's heart raced as he glanced over at Devin, who had been stationed near a particularly dilapidated section of the cemetery. Devin had been recording near a freshly dug grave, an oddity considering Oak Ridge's age. Every grave should be ancient. Mark and Rachel rushed over, only to find that Devin's equipment lay scattered on the ground. His radio was silent, his flashlight flickering weakly on the damp soil. There was no sign of Devin himself. They searched frantically along the narrow path, calling out his name, but there was only an oppressive silence. The team's initial excitement soured instantly. It was as if Devin had simply vanished into thin air, swallowed by the darkness and the overgrown grounds of the cemetery. A palpable dread began to creep in. Mark radioed for backup, reporting a missing person, while Rachel continued to document everything. They combed through the area, their hearts pounding with every step, until a disturbing discovery was made. An empty grave, recently disturbed, with a 6-foot-deep pit yawning open in the center. The edges of the grave were fresh, the soil loose and disheveled, as if something or someone had fallen in. The discovery sent a shockwave through the remaining team members. As Mark and Rachel circled the disturbed grave, a grim picture began to form. The grave's edges were not neatly carved, and there were signs that someone had tried desperately to climb out. The soil had collapsed in some areas, and the pit was shrouded in darkness. A faint, metallic glint near the edge caught Mark's eye. A watch, perhaps, or a fragment of something personal. Rachel's camera zoomed in on the disturbed earth, capturing every detail. It's like someone fell in," she whispered, her voice shaking. Mark's mind raced back to the frantic moments before Devin's disappearance. Could it be that in the chaos of the night, Devin had accidentally fallen into this empty grave? The thought was as horrifying as it was plausible. Determined to find answers, Mark carefully lowered himself towards the edge of the grave. With trembling hands, he brushed away the loose soil and peered into the darkness. The pit was deeper than it appeared, a cavernous hole that swallowed the faint beam of his flashlight. Mark could make out the faint outline of a figure, but it was impossible to tell if it was Devon or something else entirely. He radioed to Rachel. I think Devon fell in. We need to call for help immediately." But even as he said it, the realization struck him. If Devon was down there, he would be trapped, unable to cry out for help over the weight of the collapsing soil. The possibility that Devon could have broken his legs and ribs while falling, rendering him unable to escape, loomed over him like a specter. Minutes turned to agonizing hours. Mark and Rachel waited by the grave, calling out for Devon, their voices echoing off the cold stone walls of the cemetery. The night stretched on, each minute amplifying their terror. The air was thick with dread and regret, and as the hours passed, the reality set in. Devon was gone. For the next week, the investigation ground to a halt. The authorities were called in, and search teams scoured the cemetery, but there was no sign of Devon. The empty grave remained undisturbed, sealed by the weight of earth that had claimed him. The team was forced to suspend their investigation, leaving the mystery of Devon's disappearance to fester in the silence of Oak Ridge Cemetery. Mark and Rachel were left haunted by their failure. Mark, in particular, was tormented by the thought of Devon trapped in that pit, his desperate struggle silenced by the oppressive darkness. Rachel's footage, which had captured the eerie moments of the night, only deepened their sense of loss and foreboding. Every replay of the video showed flickering shadows and the telltale disturbance in the grave, a reminder of a tragedy that no one could undo. Rumors began to circulate in the local community. Some said that the restless spirits of the cemetery had claimed another victim, while others whispered that Devon's disappearance was a cruel twist of fate, a grim accident masked by the supernatural legends of Oak Ridge. Yet as the days turned into a week and then a month, hope dwindled. Devon was missing, and the empty grave stood as a silent monument to a horror that defied explanation. 1 month after that dreadful night, during the routine preparations for a funeral at Oak Ridge Cemetery, a maintenance worker discovered something that would forever alter the narrative of Devon's disappearance. While digging a new grave for an unclaimed body, the worker's shovel struck something hard beneath the soil. At first, he thought it was a rock, but as he dug deeper, the horrifying truth revealed itself.
There at the bottom of a collapsed section of the disturbed grave lay the mangled remains of a man. It was unmistakably Devon. His belongings, including a battered wristwatch and a set of headphones, were scattered around him. The marks on his body told a gruesome tale: broken legs, fractured IEDs, and deep lacerations from the impact of the fall. The realization was gut-wrenching. Devon had indeed fallen into that empty grave in the dark of night, knocked unconscious by the fall, and was slowly suffocated by the collapsing earth. The authorities were called, and an investigation was launched. The initial theories ranged from a tragic accident to a deliberate act by a vengeful spirit. The ghost hunters' footage, the missing time, and the eerie silence that had shrouded Oak Ridge Cemetery that night only added layers of mystery to the case. For months, the legend of Devon's disappearance grew, a cautionary tale about the dangers lurking in the haunted grounds of Oak Ridge. In the aftermath of Devon's tragic end, Mark and Rachel were left to pick up the shattered pieces of their investigation. The police ruled it an accidental death, a horrifying mishap in a centuries-old cemetery, but whispers persisted. Some locals claimed that the disturbed grave was cursed, that the spirits of Oak Ridge had opened it to claim one more soul. Others suggested that Devon had stumbled upon something he wasn't meant to see, a secret buried with the dead. Driven by guilt and the need for closure, Mark began retracing the steps of that fateful night. He interviewed cemetery staff, dug through old records, and even revisited the spot where Devon had fallen. What he uncovered was chilling. Decades-old accounts of unexplained collapses in certain sections of Oak Ridge, where the ground seemed to shift and sink without warning. In one instance, a laborer had described hearing desperate cries from a collapsing grave, but by the time help arrived, it was too late. Mark began to suspect that Devon's fall was no random accident. The empty grave had been in a part of the cemetery known for its unstable soil, a remnant of an old burial practice that was long since abandoned. Perhaps, in the darkness and panic of that night, Devon had wandered too close to the edge. The truth was as simple as it was horrifying. In his frantic escape from what he believed were supernatural terrors, Devon had fallen victim to the very earth he sought to conquer. Yet even as Mark uncovered these facts, an unsettling question lingered. Had the spirits of Oak Ridge played a role in driving Devon toward that fatal pit? The line between natural tragedy and paranormal influence blurred in the humid Alabama night, leaving more questions than answers. The twist came one rainy evening when Mark received an anonymous letter slipped under his apartment door. The envelope, stained with dirt and marked with an unfamiliar crest, contained a single cryptic message: "The dead whisper secrets, but the living must learn to listen." Along with the note was a faded photograph of Oak Ridge Cemetery, taken decades ago, showing a group of mourners gathered around a freshly dug grave, marked with a symbol identical to the one on the envelope. At first, Mark thought it was a cruel joke, a final taunt from the forces he had been chasing. But as he pored over the photograph, he noticed something even more disturbing. Among the mourners, partially obscured by shadows, was a man bearing an uncanny resemblance to Devon. It was as if the ghost of his fallen friend had reached out from beyond the grave to leave a clue, a final message that bridged the gap between life and death. This twist forced Mark to confront the possibility that Devon's disappearance and tragic end were intertwined with a legacy of secrets buried deep within Oak Ridge Cemetery, a legacy that spanned generations. The letter hinted at a dark pact, one in which the boundary between the living and the dead was blurred. It suggested that Devon, like many before him, had been drawn to the cemetery not merely by chance, but by forces beyond his control. A force that had whispered his name in the darkness and lured him into the earth. In the weeks that followed, Mark and Rachel delved deeper into the history of Oak Ridge, uncovering a series of unsolved mysteries and bizarre occurrences that painted a picture of a cemetery steeped in both tragedy and dark ritual. The evidence suggested that the collapse of the empty grave was not solely due to unstable soil, but perhaps triggered by a convergence of spectral energy, one that sought to reclaim a lost soul by burying him alive. Now, a year after that harrowing night, Mark stands as a reluctant guardian of Oak Ridge's secrets. He continues to document the paranormal, his work forever tinged with the sorrow of losing Devon. The cemetery has since been fenced off, and the disturbed grave sealed with warnings in multiple languages, yet locals still whisper about the night when the dead reached out from the earth. In a twist of fate, what began as an investigation into ghosts transformed into a personal quest for redemption and understanding. Mark learned that sometimes the most horrifying mysteries are not the result of supernatural forces, but of our own actions, of the choices we make in moments of terror. Devon's fall, a tragic accident in the dark, unpopulated night of a haunted cemetery, became a symbol of that blurred line between fate and free will. And so, as I share this story with you tonight, I leave you with one thought-provoking question. In a world where the living and the dead share whispered secrets beneath the surface, how much of our destiny is truly our own, and how much is dictated by the echoes of the past? For those who listen closely to the wind in Alabama's cemeteries, the truth is that every lost soul leaves behind a trace, a story etched in the earth, waiting for someone to decipher its meaning. Mark continues his journey, haunted not by vengeful spirits alone, but by the legacy of a friend he lost to the darkness. And while Oak Ridge Cemetery remains a forbidden place, its secrets endure, challenging us to ask, when we dare to confront our deepest fears, might we also unearth the unexpected truths that bind us all?
So yeah, rest in peace. Devon, terrifying way to go. And nobody deserves that. Not even ghost hunters, okay? Do I wish there were a lot less ghost hunters? Yeah, of course I do. Do I wish ghost hunting was a real thing and the evidence was real? Do I wish ghosts were actually out there trying to communicate with us and receptive to our communication? Absolutely I do. That would be so much fun to know. That'd be so relieving to know that there's something after death. In my opinion, you turn the switch and the lights go out. And then we just forever sleep not knowing anything and everything's a void. And you know what? That sounds great. You ever wake up in the morning a little too early and you can't go back to sleep, but you wish you could just go back to sleep? That's what I think death is. You finally get to go back to sleep. There's no more responsibilities. There's no more stress. There's no more road rage. There's no more ice capades. There's nothing. And you won't be scared because you can't be scared because there's nothing. Sounds good to me. I'm creeping myself out right now. Help me out. Help me get out of my creepy status by liking this video if you liked this short story and subscribing to the Just Awful show on the Just Awful channel here. I'd really appreciate it. We do stories every single week, little short stories, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever it is. We get the point across and then we get out of there. I don't want to waste your whole day, okay? I don't want to waste my whole day. So once a week, you're going to get Just Awful. I'm going to be the most awful part of your week every single week if you subscribe and you hit the notification bell, okay? That is my goal. So what are we going to talk about next week? I have no idea. Because I really have no idea. You've got a big list of stuff right here. You can pick any one of them. I got hundreds of stories. Hundreds of them, and you keep sending them to me too. So send me your story here and I'll read yours if it's good. If it's not good, don't be offended. You just don't know how to write things. You don't know how to do it right. Not saying that I do, but this is my show. So whatever I do is right, right? Right. Okay, I'm rambling now, okay? So I will see you next week. I'm Brandon Bishop. This has been Just Awful. Yes, it has.